views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey everybody, it's time for the Bronx Buzz, and what we do on this program, you may or may not already know, we talk to Bronx journalists and we find out what they're thinking about, what they're writing about. It gives you a little insight as to what's going on behind the news, and sometimes we get into a little more perspective than you might already get in their newspapers or photos or whatever else they're doing. We have a great show this evening for you, and we're going to start off with my buddy Robert Wersing from the Bronx Times reporter. Always nice to chat with Robert. How are you today, Robert?
Pretty good, Gary. Hope you're doing well, too.
Yeah, busy. Of course, that's how we do it in the Bronx. Robert, we're going to talk about some of the things you've actually written. Just a quick overview. I know that you're the photo editor over there, and that's really been, over the generations, one of the nice things about the Bronx Times. Talk to me a little bit about this. We've had this dialogue before, but I think it's worth repeating. Talk to me a little bit about the photos that you choose, the photographers you use, and really what events you decide to cover, which is really, like everything, a wide range. But just give me an overview of that aspect of your work at the Bronx Times.
Oh, sure. So we cover a lot of different events. We cover pretty much everything from award ceremonies to street renamings, grand openings for businesses, reopenings for certain locations as well. Even like recently, we did the grand reopening for Orchard Beach for beach season. So we covered those events too, like very seasonal events. So yeah, we cover very many different events, like even like summer block parties, just like overall like a lot of like very fun neighborhood celebrations, and we're always like very open to covering events, usually like dealing like with the community or just like overall like promoting the community in a very positive way.
I don't know if I've ever asked you this before. Can you characterize about how many shoots you do or how many photographers you do in, I don't know, a week, a month? I mean, because there are so many events in the Bronx, and I'd love to just get my arms around the size of what it is that you put out every week.
Right. Well, let's see. So for photographers, like we only have like a team of at least 10 freelance photographers.
Wow. You say only,
yeah.
That's a pretty good number.
Yeah. We actually just hired 3 of the 10 very recently, and they're both all 3 are very, very experienced and do really great work, as do our other photographers too. Like they've been with us for many years. But yeah, so as far as like a lot of photos,
I mean, I don't know. Do you do? I don't want to put you on the spot. Do you put in 10 a week or 20 a week in the paper? What do you do?
Probably more than that. Like lately, we've been doing like at least like 10 photo pages of like what we call photo cut lines, which are
10
usually
pages.
like
Wow.
Yeah. And that's usually like inside our paper, like we have like the photo section, and that's like the individual photos.
Right.
And in addition to that, we actually do like full page spreads. So that could actually be of like one event.
Wow.
So for example, in tomorrow's paper, one of the photo spreads that we have is actually of our 25 Bronx Influential Women ceremony that we hold every year. And we had that event last Tuesday over at Maestro's Caterers.
Mm-hmm. You know, one thing I just want to mention, and don't take this the wrong way, these are not award-winning photos in many cases. It's really photo ops. But people in the Bronx love it. They love it because they see their family, they see their friends, they see their neighbors, they see their name in the picture in the paper. I mean, my hat's off to the Bronx Times for recognizing that need, and then, of course, over the many years, following through. So I don't know if you want to respond to that, but I just think it's fantastic. It's what a real community needs, and you guys serve that need exceedingly well.
Yeah, I feel the same way too, and even our freelancers feel the same way about that too. Like they always get like so happy to see their work run in our
That's
paper,
interesting.
appear on our websites or social media accounts. And it's just great. And like I even get like phone calls from residents like asking like where can they pick up a copy of the paper because their relative was in
Yeah,
this
right.
photo or
That's right.
anything like
And
that. Yeah.
and for photographers who want to take great pictures and great news photos, sometimes it's the simplest one that generates the most interest. Great, great. Anyway, I do want to move on. I thought this was a really interesting story that you did about the Catholic widows and widowers notching. It said your article said they got up to 25 years. Tell me what that group is all about. That sounds like a real important support group.
Yeah, it is actually a very important group. So the group is they've been based in Our Lady of the Assumption Church, which is over in Pelham Bay for 25 years.
Right.
And basically, the group offers Catholic widows and widowers support, companionship, and healing throughout like many different like fun activities that they host like every month. And these like kind of like run the gamut from like daytime trips to casinos or just like trips to like one trip that they have coming up is actually at Nashville, Tennessee. So they actually like go like outside the borough for like many fun activities. And in addition to that, like they do host like monthly meetings. They first started off with a mass dedicated to a family member who passed away very recently within that month. And right after the mass is held, they pretty much do like a meeting. And usually, like after the meetings, they go out and just have dinner at like a local restaurant, just as like a fun little way to socialize and just pretty much like get to know each other better.
Right. I think if I can interject, they also helps to combat loneliness. Also, if you say, gee whiz, I've lost, God forbid, I've lost somebody who has lived with me for 40 years and now I'm all alone. And then you meet somebody who has been through it. That can only help. I mean, that's good for mental health. It's good for productivity. I mean, it's a really excellent concept.
It is. And a lot of people who I spoke to, particularly the president, she felt the same way. Like she came into the organization in 2003, and she's been a part of it ever since. And she like really sees like how it's helped people move from the grieving point in their lives to pretty much like find a new lease on their life
Right.
after losing someone so close to them.
Right. I don't know if it's the wrong thing to ask, but you would wonder if maybe some romance ultimately came out of a situation like that where two people were alone. I mean, and still, and they met somebody else and they found companionship. I don't know if you have an answer for that, but that would be kind of a nice thing to say, wow, we brought more people together. It's about people supporting each other.
Yeah, I think that would be a nice thing too. Like I don't think there's anything like like recently that's happened, but
Yeah,
I mean it could happen. It's definitely
it's
not
like
the realm of possibility.
excuse me. It's like a movie skit. You can probably make a movie out of that. Anyway, we want to talk about something else that you wrote about, and this one is actually very close to me personally. I was very good friends and professional colleagues with Andrew Sandler, who passed away recently and was the district manager of Community Board 7. I knew him very well as an assistant to both Councilmember Capel and more recently to Councilmember Cohen. And they named the street after him. I mean, I don't know what to say about it other than it's a nice thing for a very deserving guy.
Oh yeah, I agree. I actually interviewed Andrew Sandler back when he was appointed as district manager for Board 7. So it was just, like when I heard of his passing last year, it was just like really devastating. Like I just couldn't believe, somebody that young could pass away. And he really was very helpful. Like I actually would call up Board 7 for many different things, like story ideas, help with photos.
And let me, we're running out of time, and I want to move it forward. And I can answer for you. He always reacted great, and he always had information. I mean, I always found him incredibly responsive, more so, frankly, than many. I just want to wrap up the segment with you, Robert. You told me before the show you got kind of a cool story that's coming out in Friday's paper. Tell me a little bit about the classic cars of Throggs Neck.
Oh, sure. So the BronxNet Classic Car Cruise, which is celebrating its third year this year, actually just recently celebrated its biggest night ever. So last Thursday, they held their first car cruise of 2018, and they had approximately 345 cars at Trump Golf Links, which is their biggest turnout yet.
Wow.
So this report was basically just like talking about their show and also like the two upcoming shows that they have coming up this year,
Right.
which are July 26th and also October 4th, with rain dates for August 9th and October 11th.
The fact that they've been, Robert, the fact that they've been doing it for many years, to me, it only enhances what we know about our diverse borough of the Bronx. There's space and room for everybody's interests. You like classic cars? We got it in the BX, and that's the way it is. Robert, you got to say hello to all my buddies over there. We can list them. It's Alex and Sarah and Patrick and Laura and all the photographer friends. So tell them all I said hello, and we always thank you for your time on our show, and we hope to catch you sometime next time.
Will do. Thank you so much, Gary.
Right, all the best. Take care. All right, there you go. Robert Wersing from the Bronx Times Reporter. And guess what's going to happen now? Yeah, we're going to take a break. And then we'll come back with Michael Benjamin, one of the members of the editorial staff of the New York Post. We'll talk about some citywide issues right after this.
Owner lost his job. It was rough. I was living on the street, and one night, me and this Cocker Spaniel got into it so bad, I wound up looking like an ice cream cone. I cried a little bit, but thankfully I got rescued, so I'm running, I'm jumping, all back to my old self. And I'm ready to give unconditional love, even if you put a lampshade on my head.
It's not always easy being a dad.
Do you have panda asthma too? Does that run in the family? This is the home of the most priceless kung fu artifacts.
But when you make an effort,
Dad, we're not supposed to touch anything. Oh, sorry. Go along, son.
it's always worth it.
Whoa, master!
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
I am gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov to learn more.
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. He really likes to be around people. And as soon as I start to make my breakfast, Hamilton is right there. I get out my mat and I'm doing a downward dog and he's underneath. He's quite the pug about town. He gets invited to a lot of parties. He knows he's a pretty big deal. I mean, look at this little face. How could you not love him?
Hey, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. Let's go right to the telephone and say good evening to my buddy Michael Benjamin, who is on the editorial board of the New York Post. How are you, Michael?
I'm good, Gary. How are you?
Good. How things at the Post? I guess everything's good. Cranking out that paper every day.
Cranking it up despite the Mayor de Blasio's bad wishes for us.
Well, I thought it was interesting that both the Post and the Daily News on the same day had imagery showing de Blasio and projecting him as Trump. And I do think it's incredibly ironic for a guy who touts himself to be a progressive to be pictured that way by both New York City tabloids. Interesting.
Yeah, it is, but that's the way the world is. Everybody wants positive media coverage, and if you're not covering positively, then there's something wrong with the media. It's fake. It's just a very, very bad negative, and it's very bad for public discourse.
Yeah, he. I don't know if we want to get into it too much, but there were rumors that he was going to fire the person investigating him, and of course that is similar to the rumors that we got out of President Trump. Let's not spend a lot of time with it. I do want to talk a little bit about the mayor and his new chancellor. One would think if one of the mayor's policies in education has been really to support traditional public schools over charter schools, that it's particularly interesting that the new chancellor, Richard Carenza, at least the story that's come out, they use the word softened, that he's softening on charter schools. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's Carenza, having worked with charter schools in his previous stints in Houston and other places, and recognizing they're not the evil bear that Mayor de Blasio and the UFT insist that they are. I mean, I think it was positive that Mr. Carenza said that charter schools are public schools, which is the absolute fact. They are public schools. They're publicly funded. They're just run by private organizations for the benefit of children. Right. Which is no different than the private organizations that the city funds to do other kinds of services for children, whether it's child welfare or it's foster care, youth programming. The city has no problem funding them, but suddenly funding public charter schools becomes an issue for people like Mayor de Blasio.
I wonder if, at least my reading of the numbers is that it's still somewhat inconclusive as to overall whether charter schools are performing better than traditional public schools. So that would be one question. The second question, of course, would be, are they union busting machines? And then the third question that's out there is the whole question of co-locations. Many traditional public schools are saying, we've lost facilities. They're educating fewer students per space than we would educate. And so it's creating kind of an uncomfortable crowding situation. So I don't know which of those you want to address.
Well, let's start with your first one first. We'll do it in order. And I can't recall which
the first one was just about whether they underperform or they're, is it inconclusive whether they are performing better than traditional public schools? Well,
I think we have two tiers of charter schools. We have the high-performing ones like Success. And then you have some of the more community-oriented ones that maybe are not performing as well, maybe are performing similar to public schools. It all depends on how you look at it. It all depends on the charter organizations, evaluations, and then decide if they want to remove their charters. Charters that have been poorly performing, underperforming public schools have been closed. And that's the essence of public charter schools, that if they're not performing to standard, they're closed, unlike public schools, which remain open, oftentimes with the same failing leadership. The city has not tried to emulate the best practices of the high-performing charters like Success. And, you can't say they're not doing well if you're not trying to take what they've done well and use it in your public school. I think Chancellor Carranza is interested in looking at those best practices from public schools and your excellent charter schools and using them in other places around the city.
Do they create a budgetary problem in that you're creating an administration, a full administration and a full management team for fewer students, whereas the public schools could use that kind of management, but they can't afford to because they have so many students?
No, that's a false argument. I don't think there are many more managers for charter schools than there are for public schools. If anything, public schools have a much greater bureaucracy than these tiny charter schools. Even the charter school networks are not anything as top heavy as the DOE is.
Yeah.
So
I
that's
guess
a false argument.
what I was suggesting is not necessarily that it's a charter school issue. It's almost really an issue when you have 4 schools, let's say within one high school or one high school building, whether it's a charter school or not. Of course, that means 4 administrations.
Well, that's the fault of the DOE and Bloomberg for creating these mini schools that duplicate bureaucrats. To me, that's more of a problem than a charter school co-locating in a public school in unused space, actually space that was once used by their own students whose parents took them out of the school, put them in a charter because the public school was not educating them. Right. And that NYU study, not NYU, a new school study showed that parents are opting their children out of the local public school to attend a local charter school, believing and understanding that the local charter school is somewhat better than the local public school.
Final question.
And these are real parents that are doing that.
The final question on this matter, because I want to get to a couple of other things. How do you see the future of this playing out? Do you see of course, that'll be a state thing, whether they lift the cap on the number of charters. But do you see the landscape, so to speak, changing generally or drastically in this regard? Or you think softening is the right word to use because
I see
it'll take a
the
different
landscape.
attitude?
See the landscape remaining as it is. Governor Cuomo has not been an active supporter as he once was. He's looking at his poll numbers. He's looking at running for president. So he's been a big disappointment when it comes to charters. I think the status quo will remain. I don't see it changing in the state. I don't see an expansion of the number of charters across the state. I think we're just going to be running in place until there's a new governor in 2018.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
2019, I'm sorry.
Let's move across. I know you're a sports fan, like I am a sports fan. Fascinating that the Supreme Court has opened the way for sports betting. What do you make of it? Good thing for sports? Good thing for America? Or going to create more problems than it's worth?
Well, I think it creates more problems. Gambling on sports. We've seen scandals in the past, and there are those who claim, well, it's because it's illegal and you have the criminal element involved. I don't think that changes any of that. I think it skews how players operate and it skews how teams are managed when you have these betting lines that are out there, and that becomes the talk. That becomes the talk of sports. I mean, you can't watch football, college football, or any pro football game without mention of what the point spread is. And to me, that takes away from the game.
I'm kind of on board of that. As you know, I'm a rabid baseball fan and certainly watch all the other sports as well. And I wonder if this is going to lead the way for the dialogue about, the betting line or the odds or anything like that. That will eat its way into the broadcast. It'll become part of the dialogue and say, well, so-and-so, the percentage of this guy winning the game or the odds against this team winning the game, to me, it infiltrates it in the wrong way. I guess what we'd all like to see, if there is money, that the money go to the right thing for education or healthcare or something.
I'm not buying into that argument. The other thing is we don't want to create like point shaving in basketball.
Yeah.
What if LeBron has a bad game? Are people going to start claiming that he was shaving points?
Right, depending on what the odds were for that game, yeah.
Yeah, and that becomes very problematic in a sport like basketball, where players have individual influence on the outcome of the game and what the point spread is going to be, will wind up being. And that creates greater problems than I think we need. I'm afraid that the leagues are looking at getting increased revenue as a way of paying players more and lining the pockets of the billionaire families that that run and own major league teams.
Yeah, I also, on another level, would be concerned about fans who, now listen, some people enjoy betting and, it's part of our culture. You can go to Empire Casino anytime you want. But I'd be worried that more people would be trapped into it, and then the ferocity with which they root it's not only because they want their team to win, it's because, goodness gracious, I just put $500 down on this thing, and if I lose that, that creates problems for me and my family. So I think you and I are in agreement with that. I'm very concerned about this.
Yeah, and I would hope when the legislature looks at this and not look to pass any legislation between now and June 20th, when session is scheduled to end, that they will actually have hearings maybe in the fall into the winter to determine what's the best way to go and how to handle it, how to have additional dollars going towards resources for Gambling Anonymous, other kinds of gambling assistance for those who have an issue with it. Mm-hmm. I don't think they should create in New York State sports betting without deliberation.
Yeah, in other words, just all of a sudden kind of license these things and boom, the next thing you know, you got gambling houses all over the place. Michael, we have about 50 more topics that we want to talk about, but we have no more time to do it. So it's really always a pleasure to have you on the show. You always provide really important content for us and the people of the Bronx, and continued good luck and success over there at the New York Post.
Yeah, please keep reading the paper and read us online.
There you go. And you'll be able to pick out the couple of sentences that Michael put in there because you hear what he says on this show. Anyway, thank you so much, Michael, and all the best to you.
Gary, thank you.
Okay, so guess what, folks? I'm going to do like this because that's a wrap. We are done buzzing along this evening, and we will see you next time in the Bronx Buzz. Monday night's going to be a fun night on Bronx Talk because we're going to do a lighter show, so to speak. We're going to talk about Woodlawn Cemetery and all the incredible things that go on there in terms of events and also in terms of the legacy of the many, many well-known people that are buried there. And so that's what we'll do Monday night on Bronx Talk. And we will see you around town. Keep buzzing along.
Owner lost his job. It was rough. I was living on the street, and one night, me and this Cocker Spaniel got into it so bad, I wound up looking like an ice cream cone. I cried a little bit, but thankfully I got rescued, so I'm running, I'm jumping, all back to my old self, and I'm ready to give unconditional love, even if you put a lampshade on my head.
It's not always easy being a dad.
Do you have panda asthma too? Does that run in the family? This is the home of the most priceless kung fu artifacts.
But when you make an effort,
Dad, we're not supposed to touch anything. Oh, sorry.
Go along, son!
it's always worth it.
Whoa! Faster!
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
I am gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov to learn more.
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. He really likes to be around people. And as soon as I start to make my breakfast, Hamilton is right there. I get out my mat and I'm doing a downward dog and he's underneath. He's quite the pug about town. He gets invited to a lot of parties. He knows he's a pretty big deal. I mean, look at this little face. How could you not love him?